The morning sun rose slowly over the small town of Cedar Ridge, casting a golden glow over the quiet streets. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine trees and freshly cut grass. It was a town where everyone knew everyone, where life moved at its own pace, and where stories of ordinary people often held extraordinary secrets. In the heart of Cedar Ridge stood a modest office building, home to a mid-sized company called Horizon Supplies. The company was known for its hard-working employees and its commitment to quality service. But like any workplace, it had its struggles. The CEO, a man named Darren Cole, had been feeling a growing disconnect between himself and his employees. He had built Horizon Supplies from the ground up, but lately he felt like he was losing touch with the very people who kept the company running. Darren was a man in his early 40s, with sharp features and a determined gaze. He had always been a hands-on leader, but the demands of running a growing business had pulled him further away from the day-to-day operations. He spent most of his time in boardrooms, reviewing spreadsheets and making high-level decisions. But something was missing. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but he knew he needed to reconnect with his team. One evening, as Darren sat in his office, staring at the city lights through the window, an idea struck him. He had heard of CEOs going undercover in their own companies to understand the challenges their employees faced. It was a bold move, but Darren felt it was exactly what he needed. He decided to disguise himself as a new employee and work alongside his staff. He wanted to see the company through their eyes, to understand their struggles, and to find ways to make things better. The next morning, Darren arrived at Horizon Supplies dressed in simple work clothes, his face partially hidden under a baseball cap. He introduced himself as Dan, a new hire looking for work. The HR department, unaware of his true identity, assigned him to the janitorial team. It was there that Darren met Walt Thompson, a 70-year-old janitor who had been with the company for over a decade. Walt was a quiet man with a gentle demeanor. His hands were rough from years of hard work, but his eyes carried a warmth that immediately put Darren at ease. Walt was the kind of person who always had a kind word for everyone, even on the toughest days. As Darren began his new role, he quickly realized how demanding the job was. Cleaning floors, emptying trash bins, and maintaining the building's appearance was no easy task. But what struck him most was Walt's dedication. Despite his age, Walt worked tirelessly, never complaining, always going the extra mile to ensure everything was spotless. One afternoon, as Darren and Walt took a short break in the staff lounge, Darren decided to strike up a conversation. "So, Walt, how long have you been working here?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Walt smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Oh, about 12 years now," he replied. "It's not the most glamorous job, but it pays the bills." Darren nodded, sensing there was more to Walt's story. "You ever think about retiring?" Walt chuckled softly. "Retirement? Nah, not for me. I like keeping busy. Besides, this job gives me a sense of purpose." There was something in Walt's tone that made Darren curious. Over the next few days, he found himself drawn to the older man. He noticed how Walt always arrived early, how he took pride in his work, and how he treated everyone with kindness and respect. But there was also a sadness in Walt's eyes, a hint of something unspoken. One evening, as they were cleaning the office after hours, Darren decided to dig deeper. "Walt, you ever think about your life before this? What did you do before working here?" Walt paused, his hand resting on the mop handle. For a moment, he seemed lost in thought. Then he sighed and said, "I've lived a lot of lives, Dan. Some good, some not so good. But that's all in the past now." Darren could tell Walt was holding back. He wanted to know more, but he didn't want to push too hard. Instead, he focused on building trust, hoping Walt would open up when he was ready. A few days later, Darren's patience paid off. It was a rainy afternoon, and the two men were taking shelter in the break room. Walt was unusually quiet, staring out the window as the rain tapped against the glass. "You okay, Walt?" Darren asked, sitting down across from him. Walt hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, just thinking about my son. Today's his birthday." Darren's heart ached at the sadness in Walt's voice. "You must be proud of him," he said gently. Walt's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, Darren saw the pain the older man had been carrying. He didn't make it, Walt said, his voice breaking. He was a soldier, died in combat 10 years ago. The room fell silent, the weight of Walt's words hanging in the air. Darren felt a lump in his throat. He had no idea Walt had endured such a loss. "I'm so sorry, Walt," Darren said softly. "I can't imagine how hard that must be." Walt wiped his eyes and took a deep breath. "It's been tough, but I try to honor his memory by living a good life. He was a hero, saved his entire unit. I wish I could have done more for him." Darren's respect for Walt grew even deeper. Here was a man who had faced unimaginable pain, yet he continued to show up every day with a smile on his face and kindness in his heart. As the weeks went by, Darren learned more about Walt's past. He discovered that Walt himself had served in the military, earning several medals for bravery during his time in the service. After retiring from the Army, Walt had struggled to adjust to civilian life. He had taken the janitorial job at Horizon Supplies to make ends meet, but he never spoke about his military service. To his coworkers, he was just Walt, the friendly janitor. Darren was amazed by Walt's humility. Here was a man who had risked his life for his country, yet he never sought recognition or praise. He simply did his job with quiet dignity, finding purpose in the small acts of service. One day, Darren decided it was time to reveal his true identity. He called a company-wide meeting, inviting every employee to the main conference room. As the staff gathered, whispers filled the air. No one knew what was going on. When Darren stepped onto the stage, still dressed as Dan, the room fell silent. He took a deep breath and began to speak. "For the past few weeks, I've been working alongside you as Dan, the new janitor. But the truth is, I'm Darren Cole, your CEO." Gasps echoed through the room as employees exchanged shocked glances. Darren continued, his voice steady. "I wanted to understand what it's like to work on the front lines of this company. And let me tell you, I've learned more in these past few weeks than I have in years of sitting in boardrooms." He paused, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Walt. "There's one person in particular who has taught me what it truly means to be a hero. Walt Thompson. Would you please join me up here?" Walt looked stunned, but he slowly made his way to the stage. Darren placed a hand on his shoulder and addressed the crowd. "Walt is more than just a janitor. He's a war hero, a man who served his country with honor and bravery. He's also a father who lost his son in combat, yet he continues to show up every day with a heart full of kindness and a spirit of service. Walt, you've inspired me in ways I can't even put into words, and I want everyone here to know you are the heart and soul of this company." The room erupted into applause, tears streaming down many faces. Walt stood there, humbled and overwhelmed. Darren turned to him and said, "Walt, from this day forward, you'll no longer be working as a janitor. I'm creating a new position for you, Veteran Liaison Officer. Your job will be to support our employees who are veterans, to ensure they have the resources and care they need. And I'll be personally funding a scholarship in your son's name to help other children of fallen soldiers pursue their dreams." Walt's eyes filled with tears as he shook Darren's hand. "Thank you. Thank you so much," he said, his voice trembling. The room was filled with emotion as employees surrounded Walt, offering hugs and words of gratitude. It was a moment of unity, a reminder that heroes come in all forms, and that kindness and humility can change lives. As the meeting came to an end, Darren felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had set out to reconnect with his employees, but he had gained so much more. He had discovered the true meaning of leadership, not just making decisions from the top, but listening, learning, and lifting others up. And as for Walt, he finally felt seen. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe that his life still had meaning, that his sacrifices had not been in vain. The story of Darren and Walt spread throughout Cedar Ridge, inspiring others to look beyond appearances and to recognize the heroes in their midst. It was a reminder that every person has a story, and that sometimes the greatest acts of courage are the ones that go unnoticed. In the end, the moral of the story was simple. True leadership is about empathy, about seeing the humanity in others and honoring their struggles. And sometimes the people who seem the most ordinary are the ones who carry the most extraordinary stories. As the sun set over Cedar Ridge, casting a warm glow over the town, Darren and Walt stood side by side, looking out at the horizon. They had both found something they had been searching for, a connection, a purpose, and a reminder that even in the darkest times, there's always hope. And so the undercover boss and the war hero Janitor became a symbol of what can happen when we take the time to truly see one another. It was a story of courage, compassion, and the power of second chances. And it all started with a simple act of kindness. That's the story, friends. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a pleasure sharing it with you all. Don't forget to comment below and let me know where you're watching from. It's always fun to see the global reach of these stories. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button for more amazing stories, tips, and tricks. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. If you'd like to show some extra love, tap the 3 dots near the share button and send a super thanks.